그 다음 발표는 이어서 그 핀란드 총리실의 율라 로젠스트롬 수석 전문위원의 발표가 있겠습니다. 발표 주제는 핀란드 정부의 미래 연구 활동이겠습니다. 예, 로젠스트롬 박사님의 발표를 청합니다.
Thank you. Wonder how I will manage with my hands tied in these things, but let's try. So, thank you for inviting me to speak here, and greetings from Finland. It wasn't quite as sunny and beautiful in Finland as I left as it is here, so I'm really happy to be here this week. I'm going to talk about what the Finnish government is doing in terms of foresight, and I'm really describing the different activities that we do, because I am no foresight expert at all. My main mission in work is now, and has been for a long time, to get information that we produce, to get the information used. Because we have, of course, many foresight activities in Finland, and it would take me much longer than 30 minutes to describe them. So I'm really concentrating more on what we do in the government to give you a glimpse of that. So the 4 things that I want to talk about is the Finnish government future report, then about the description of the Finnish policymaking environment, and also about ministry's future reviews. These are things that happen every 4 years, so there's a clear cycle for them. But it's kind of silly to do things according to electoral, when we have elections, then we do these things. We need to do things continuously, because things happen all the time, and therefore, fourthly, I will talk about this new national foresight approach that we have in Finland, or we're trying to put in place, but very slowly and by experimenting what works. There's actually quite, like I said, it happens every 4 years. So I thought I'd still draw a picture here how it takes place. So first, it happens in a cycle, but from my point of view, the government future report is right now the oldest, so that takes place always first. It's when we have a new government in Finland, they make the new government, and the prime minister decides what is the major thing that he or she wants to know about the future, and then he commissions a future report that's then done in the Prime Minister's office where I work, and then the government submits it to the parliament. I will talk a little bit more about it soon. So anyway, that takes place first, and it influences this description of the Finnish policy-making environment. You can also call it the State of the Future report. That's also done regularly to see where we are right now when we're heading for the elections. And that's done jointly by the ministries, but then we get the ministries' future reviews that are again influenced by this report. Then we have these elections and the government program, and from here, of course, comes again this selecting the theme. And we have all these bits of information that are being used or not used in these different projects. But in the future, we will hopefully have this national foresight approach in place where all these pieces are more coherent, or at least we know where they are. But if I go more into detail of these 4 different points that I said I will talk about. So the government future report is done once during each electoral period. And like I said, it's the government who submits it to the parliament. So our parliament is of 200 elected politicians, and there's a special committee for future that is dealing with future-related issues, and they're commissioning reports and doing many activities. And as I just said in the previous, as we were talking before this conference, our previous prime minister was actually, as he was a politician and in the parliament, he was in this parliamentary committee, and now that we're going to have elections, one of the strongest possibilities for our next prime minister is also sitting in this futures committee right now. So I would say that in Finland we do have a very strong future-oriented politicians, which I'm proud of. And we've had this tradition of making these future reports for 20 years. So it's quite special, because what happens is when the government has its report ready, it's given to the parliament, and the parliament actually, they discuss it. And they discussed this last report about 2 weeks ago for 4 hours. They went on about this report and what it has, and about experimentation, for example, how things should be done. Because in Finland we have this culture of maybe planning things a little bit too carefully, and you're not allowed to fail. If you fail, you're really a loser. And in Finland we want to be more entrepreneurial in the future. We want to be more brave. It's okay to make a mistake and do things again, and not always plan everything ready before doing it. We can plan along, and this is the kind of cultural change that we're trying to bring through, for example, this future report. And the one that was just now completed, or the dialogue is still going on a bit, it was about well-being through sustainable growth, so not very specific. Our previous one was much more specific on long-term climate and energy policy. Just a little bit about the process. So this future report, it actually takes quite many years and quite a lot of resources. So it takes the whole 4 years, more or less, and takes up a lot of resources. And until now, it's been done quite separately from other Foresight work. So in the future, I hope that wouldn't be that way. But it clearly has a Foresight phase where they listen to a lot of people. We had a website, regional hearings, and talking with experts. So all these reports usually, it really involves hundreds of people, which is a lot in a country of 5 million people, where they first do the Foresight phase and then the actual strategy phase and the report. But for us, the implementation of the report is actually really important. And even at the moment, the parliamentary committee is mostly concerned that we have all this information, all this Foresight stuff, and does it have any impact? Is it being used? And again, like I said in the beginning, that's my main concern, no matter where it's Foresight data or other indicator data. Does it really get used? Because it's not enough to have the information. You actually have to do something to get it used. I don't expect you to see any of this, but you have it in your slides, and I wanted to put it here because we don't, of course, make a lot of our reports in English, but actually this website about the Foresight phase we did do in English. It's, I missed the address here, but it's 2030.fi, and from there you find the Foresight report, which was this time done, so this is not the future report, but it's just the Foresight phase, and it was kind of imagining the paths of how do we get a global Finland, agile Finland, how do we use our northern expertise, and here are different ways of doing this. This report was done only digitally, so we didn't have it in paper. It doesn't run in a logical order, and many people didn't like it. They would have liked to have the paper version. So we're not very future-oriented when it comes to different methods of passing on information. Then I want to mention this Finnish policymaking environment report. Now here the point is more the process. It's not the end. You know, reports, yes, we have plenty of reports coming from all kinds of places, but the point is that here the Finnish government, the different ministries, are actually working together, because I don't know how it is in your country or countries, but in Finland the ministries traditionally try to work in silos, and they all make their own future reports of their own works, and they don't really talk to each other, which of course leads to overlapping work. Or one problem is that when we talk to the government, when we give advice to the government, different ministries give different advice. I suppose it's okay, but to some point we still should have a common idea of where we are, and that's what this description of the Finnish policymaking environment is all about. And it comes before the future reviews that the ministries make. And this was done a little bit different than before. This is also, like I said, something regular, but this time it was all ministries together, and I was coordinating it. So I was really like inviting the ministerial experts together. We were writing together. We were doing process writing. So actually, you know, putting the document in OneDrive, and everybody was seeing what the others are doing. So I was not collecting comments. I was forcing the experts to write the same document, and they see what the others had done, and they could disagree. We also used crowdsourcing I don't know if this is the right term, but we put the report in the internet, that we have this place by the government where anybody could comment. Of course, we didn't get many comments, but at least we tried. But even I was very nervous about it. Like, what if the citizens comment, is it the civil servant report anymore? But I suppose it was, because we were still the ones who chose how to integrate the citizen comments to the report. And then, of course, it was important that we then told the citizens what we had used and how we influenced to keep them interested in this. So I thought this was, for the government officials, a little bit exciting and new thing, but certainly we'll be doing it more, because it was worth it, definitely. And it's also part of the publication, because again, we can produce as many reports as you want, but one of the best ways to get people to use them is, of course, to have them participate in the process of writing these reports. And I also went to the parliament, because there are, of course, many civil servants in the parliament working for the political parties. So I went to tell them a little bit before this report came out that we're making this, and is it what you like, and how is the format? And they, for example, they said that everything should be, more or less one-page summaries, that we don't have time to read a lot of stuff. And this was not done in paper either. This was done as an HTML5 report in Finnish and Swedish, but I learned from the previous thing that they didn't like the trees that I showed you, the different paths, that it was not in paper, so this time you could have it in paper, or you could print just one page, like shopping for one page at a time. So we tried different ways of promotion and communication, also to get things used. And the content was quite traditional in terms of economy environment, but we also have this enabling state where we're trying to get, again, the government needs to be an enabler. We can't make growth, we can't really improve perhaps the economy. That needs to be done by the entrepreneurs, by the business, but we can enable it, so we need to talk about that as well. And also, I didn't have 12 chapters, as we have 12 ministries, that we did actually try to have different ministries working here together, and it worked out quite well, like I said. So the ministry's future reviews, again, something that has been done regularly since 2003, and each ministry does them independently. A year ago, I decided to ask the users of these reports, because they are the parliamentarians, they are the political parties, because when they go into the elections, we hope that the most important things are in the government program, because in Finland the government program more or less says what's going to be done in the next 4 years. So I asked the political advisors of ministers, and how could we improve them? And they said, what? Improve what? So they had never actually heard about these future reviews, although the ministries think that they are the most important product that we make. This has the most influence, but apparently they had no influence since nobody had ever heard of them. So I asked, how would you use them? What needs to be done? Well, it was clear that you need to promote them a little bit more. You need to tell about them, communicate better. But it was also obvious that, because some ministries, they had a 2-page print, actually 1 page both sides, and didn't even say that it's a future review. And then some ministries had 54 pages that you die while reading such a long report. So we decided that they need to have a common structure, because it also helps if you have 12 different reports of the same thing. And of course, it's easier for the user if they all have a common structure, that they are, you read one and you know what to expect in the other one. So we had a common structure, and I also asked them that maximum 5 things. You have to be able to say that what are the most 5 important things for your ministry that the next government should be concerned about. If you tell them 10, 15, 20, they're not gonna know what is really important. So they were forced into the common structure with 5 themes maximum. Same visual style. I don't know if that was a good idea. I ordered a special layout with this purple color, because I didn't want any political color there. So no red, no blue, no green, no orange. I think I took yes, here's purple. So it didn't turn out so cool, but it was still nice that each ministry then had like this style, and then they have their own logo up there. But it was amazing how different they were inside after all. So. And then we published them just now in the beginning of October, and we went to the parliament, because if we had published them the usual way at the Prime Minister's office, for example, they would link it to the current government, and that was not the idea. We want them to understand that it's for the politicians, for the next ones to come. So we joined up with the Committee for the Future, because otherwise they wouldn't allow us in the Parliament House. So we joined up, they presented their report, and then we had this one, and we had all the state secretaries who were present from the different ministries, and that has never happened before in Finland either. They always go one by one, and I heard that the politicians were really impressed, like, wow, all state secretaries played at the same time, and they presented the reports, but not the 12 reports, but they actually presented the reports through 3 different themes, so that was already more analysis for the users. And then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs went ahead about 3 days before this launch with their report, and there was one sentence about NATO. It said that if Finland joined NATO, it would make Finland's position more clear. And this one sentence was taken out, and it was the President commented, the Prime Minister commented, so we actually had a lot of media. Well, we were in the media and in the news and in all kinds of shows for 1 week. But it was okay. It was a little bit negative, I suppose, in terms of what they were saying that we shouldn't be writing these kind of things. But in the end, any media, any publication, I still think it's good publication. So I was really happy about this. And now we are still working on this, because I don't want the politicians to forget these reviews, because they're really good. So we're still going on trying to make some horizontal analysis for the more material for the elections to come. So then my last theme here is this cooperative and continuous foresight. And we've realized in Finland that yes, we have good foresight, the business is doing good foresight, universities are doing good foresight, NGOs are doing good stuff, the citizens, but how to get all that information kind of like we should be able to analyze or put together and see different things if we put that information together, or at least get those people to know each other. But how should we do that? So we wanted to improve that a bit. Why are we doing this? Well, I think it's important that that we need to know what is happening in the future. One thing, when I work in the Prime Minister's office, we tend to say that yes, we would like to make them do good decisions, but what we also want to do is to make the wrong and bad decisions as difficult as possible for them to make, and hence we try to give them what we know and what we have. But anyway, we need to know what is going to be important, if possible. Of course, we just heard, it's a complex world, it's difficult, but at least we should try. I would feel really bad if we didn't try, if we know something to share it. But we need to do that, we need cooperation. To have the information requires cooperation. We need to bring together all the actors, and we need to communicate. We need to make sure that these knowledge and the views are available. This is a terrible picture, but bear with me. So we have some kind of a framework of what we are kind of thinking of doing. And so we need a vision, and we need somebody to coordinate the work in Finland. And we decided that, because everybody else, we didn't really want to coordinate it, but everybody else says that it has to be the Prime Minister's office. Nobody else has the power and the legitimacy and all that. So we have a General Secretary, who's me now. So that came a little bit as a surprise, but I'm really happy to have this new challenge, heading to my 40s, and it's good to change a little bit my focus. So we have this function, but we also have a foresight group. Everybody agrees that in Finland we need to have a group of real foresight experts who have the vision. So originally we were talking a little bit about a steering group or committee, but that's a terrible word. Then I accidentally misspelled the word steering by saying cheering. And we think a cheering group is a great idea to see what we want to do in terms of foresight and what is important. And that group will have then people again from the regions, from university, from business, from citizens, NGO, think tanks. international view as well. And through this guidance, the actual means of enhancing the cooperation in Finland is to have the National Foresight Network. Certainly we've had the network before, and I'm sure all the others as well, but our Foresight Network hasn't really worked so well because it didn't really have a mission. I mean, bringing people together is not maybe enough nowadays in terms of a wise time use. It seems that this network needs to have something to do, and hence we will have to have more clear tasks for them if they meet. But what we do already now, we're in the social media, in the Yammer, and we've collected quite a good number of Finnish Foresight people there who are actually already sharing conferences they go to, sharing their publications, making new, like smaller groups in this Yammer place, saying that, you know, I would like to discuss the future of Finnish education, and then they make their own discussion group. So it's actually happening, which I'm quite excited about. And we just need to maybe push the discussion a little bit more there. And that is a great way for me to find quickly if I need to know who is doing Foresight from where, and to get messages through quickly and invite people. So this is working quite well. And we want to include here the training option of you know, making, because if somebody is inviting Real to come and talk to Finland, I think everybody should know about it, or they should share it through streaming it to internet or something so that more people can follow. So we just need to share more. Small country again, we can't afford everybody doing their own training or their own things. And then we have to all the time remember the international cooperation, because we're not an island, and we need to realize that all things are global and connected to each other. What we will also have is the Foresight forums. Now this is a big surprise to me that people still want to meet each other in person, because I had thought that having perhaps sharing information somewhere in the cloud would be enough, but we got very strong messages, especially from the industry, that, you know, kill the idea of having a platform in the internet for sharing things. Just organize meetings annually perhaps with a specific theme, and then we want different people, the decision makers, the information providers, they ought to be meeting each other with well facilitated modern technologies, the ways, you know, and have probably also international keynote speakers. So this kind of thing still has a need in Finland, so we'll go ahead and organize them. We actually have a plan for next fall, maybe something in the spring already before the elections. Many people feel that they want to send some messages through this way to the politicians as well. But we haven't completely sort of killed this idea of platform. I don't want the platform. I know that these platforms don't live because you need a person to keep them up. They must be generated automatically. My previous bigger work was a indicator.feed service. I don't know if anybody has worked with indicators, but it's in English as well. So it's such a clever word, the Finnish indicators, Findicator. But the Findicator.feed service has about 100 indicators about the Finnish society, and it works because all the graphs are automatically generated from Statistic Finland's databases. But that's about the only indicator platform that I know in this whole wide world that works and is updated. And when I ask the users, they say that updated information is the most important for them. Politicians don't want old information, and they don't want somebody from another party to have better information. So our indicators always have this information, when was it updated and when it will be next updated. So yes, I'm quite allergic to platforms, but we're now still looking if somebody else has a working place. You know, like in our, the research sector is trying to have their research projects collected into one place, so perhaps like we could have a free right there or somewhere else, because there really seems to be need for it. But I'm looking and shopping and seeing what we could do. And then whenever I draw a picture of who is doing what we're doing, I want to remember who is supposed to use it, who's the beneficiary of what we're doing. So the use will of course be the politicians And we want to make them special reviews and briefs. So every time there is a Foresight forum, there has to be some outcome, some piece of, okay, if it's a piece of paper, then it still has to be somebody who presents it at the special event of the politicians that they need it. It has to be a decision-making cycle where the information is needed. Just to hand the paper doesn't do any good. Of course, the whole society, we have government strategic research. If they plan research, they should know what we see or what we have collected about the future. And as I was talking about the Finnish government future report, the reviews, they all should be benefiting from this national approach and not be working on their own anymore. And the Committee for the Future as well. It's really quite unique, this dialogue, as I said, between the parliamentary committee, the government, and the whole society. But I suppose in the future I really want to work more with them because they are doing a good job. And, to know the future Prime Minister is not a bad thing either. And then lastly, I always want to talk about the communication of whatever we do. Do it with the users and communicate about it. So I just here had a little bit more detail, written out what I just said, so I will not go into this point. Here I still want to highlight that the approach should be used by the whole society of everything, and then of course the network is the actors, so when you are in the network you give something, you get something, and then in the middle we have the political decision making with the briefs and reviews, as I said. And finally, this is a very general comment here, but my point and my take-home message about the information, it's strong to say that it's useless, but it is pretty useless if nobody's using it. Thank you.
점점 분위기가 무르익어가고 있는 것 같습니다. 첫 번째 발표자이셨던 리엔더 박사님께서는 우리 미래 이해력이라는 주제로 우리가 어떻게 미래를 상상하고 만들어갈 것인가에 대한 굉장히 통찰적인 이 내용을 담은 발표를 해주셨다면, 두 번째인 율라 박사님께서는 핀란드에서 실제로 미래 연구와 실제 미래 연구의 결과들을 우리 핀란드 사회를 변화시키기 위해 활용하는 여러 가지 구조와 단계들을 설명을 해주신 것 같습니다. 세 번째 발표 대단히 많이 기대가 됩니다. 이어서 임란 어셔드 캐나다 미래전략청의 현임 분석관님의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 주제는 캐나다의 미래 전략에 대한 것입니다.
안녕하세요. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in the STEPI International Foresight Symposium. It's a pleasure to be here and to be back in Seoul. I'm going to talk about my organization in Canada, Policy Horizons Canada, also known as Horizons, and linking foresight to policy development. So this is the brief outline of my presentation. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Horizons, who we are, what we do, how we practice foresight at Horizons, and the particular foresight process that we follow, our methodology. And then talk about contribution to foresight and policy development in Canada, how we're helping to build foresight capacity in the government, and then I'll get into a little bit about some of the products that we have developed. So Policy Horizons Canada is actually fairly new. It's unique in the Canadian federal government in that it's the only cross-cutting organization that looks at, that does foresight. We focus on identifying emerging issues in the 10 to 15-year time horizon to ensure long-term strategic thinking is incorporated into the federal government policy development process. So we use a range of tools and collaborate with a number of participants and departmental officials in order to do this. But we also draw on experts in the Canadian government and across the world. And we also work virtually through a platform in order to make engagement online seamless with some of the work that we do face-to-face. And we only have about 25 staff, so we're quite small. And we're a matrix-type organization, so we put a lot of less emphasis on hierarchy and more on good ideas. And we're governed by a committee of 9 deputy ministers. So in Canada, the deputy minister is the senior-most public servant in the department. They take a political direction from the minister, and what they do is they just handle the day-to-day operations of the department. And in Canada, we also have a range of deputy minister policy committees. So what they do is look at medium-term planning, medium-term emerging issues in the medium term in the 3 to 5 year horizon. There's a number of issue-based departmental deputy minister policy committees. They work on, there's one on economic trends, another one on climate change and environment, another one on global trends, and as well as social trends. So out of those 4 policy committees, we have a co-chair that sits on our deputy minister steering committee, and they guide a lot of the work that we do. So as I mentioned, Horizons is quite new. It was created in May 2011. Although the organization itself goes back to 1996, where we created the Policy Research Secretariat to identify medium-term pressure points for the government policy agenda. And then in 2000, it evolved into the Policy Research Initiative, which looked at medium-term emerging issues in the 5 to 7 year time horizon. And in 2006, we established the Deputy Minister Steering Committee so that we could improve dissemination of our work to senior ranks of the public service. And then in 2011, Policy Horizons was formed. And the main impetus for that was fueled by to basically focus on longer term, 10 to 15 years emerging issues, to address what Ulla had mentioned in terms of anticipating challenges and opportunities, so more of an anticipatory approach that arise during this time frame. The other reasons that Horizons was created was to better understand the increasing complexity and interdependencies among cross-cutting issues that are resistant to traditional intervention. So Ulla had mentioned that there are a lot of departmental silos, and so Horizons works on issues that cut across departmental mandates, because we find that in Canada as well. A lot of departments just work within their particular silos. So Horizons was created to sort of transcend those departmental silos. And we basically try to create a space where departments and agencies can share ideas, experiment, and test new ideas and practices. So in terms of how we work, this slide sort of represents our motto, which is to anticipate, explore, and experiment. So anticipate, as I described, to find out emerging policy issues in the long term. We're a networking organization in terms of cultivating new ideas and knowledge from a broad range of sources. And we're a learning organization in terms of experimentation with innovative methods and technologies. One thing I mentioned before is we have a platform called ClearSpace, which basically integrates the functionality of online communities, social networking, discussion forums, blogs, and wikis into one united interface. The issue with that is if we, every time we've experimented with just solely working virtually, it hasn't been as successful unless we complement it with face-to-face meetings. So they really work in tandem and collaboration with each other. In terms of how we conduct a Foresight study, this is our process of engagement. So largely engaging federal public servants through a range of projects and collaborative workshops and events. Conduct systematic scanning of relevant literature and carry out a range of interviews with innovative thought leaders. And basically our objective is to produce and disseminate our findings in innovative ways to make sure that policymakers consider issues, outcomes, challenges, and opportunities that may be not normally on their radar. This is pretty much how we're governed, and it shows how we choose potential foresight projects that we undertake. So as indicated, the main oversight comes from our Deputy Minister Steering Committee, and but at the same time we have a large say in the topics that we decide to cover as a foresight study. So our Deputy Ministers really encourage us to think outside the box and to they don't like to direct us too much because they want us to come up with innovative issues that they normally wouldn't be considering. Usually what happens is Horizons comes up with a short list of topics, and then we pose them to our Deputy Minister Steering Committee, and they decide which ones they think we should focus on. So for example, a couple of years ago we had a short list of topics. One was emerging technologies, another one was the future of organizations, and then the other one was the changing global landscape. And we presented that to our steering committee, and they decided that they wanted us to focus on emerging technologies, so we did a study on that, which I'll describe a little bit later. At the same time, the Deputy Minister Steering Committee can also direct some of the work that we do. For example, last year we were asked by the clerk of the Privy Council, which is the senior-most public servant in the Canadian government. He indicated that they would like us to do a study on the future of Asia with some Australian counterparts as part of the Canada-Australia Public Policy Initiative. That initiative is a collaborative initiative that tries to engage the public servants of both countries in terms of particular issues, whether it be research issues or in this case, the first time we did a Foresight study with another country. So we undertook that study with Australia on the guidance of our Deputy Minister Steering Committee. So we have a different range of ways in which our Deputy Minister Steering Committee is engaged in the projects that we do. So there are many interpretations of Foresight, and this slide sort of represents what Horizon's view is. We pretty much place a large emphasis on surfacing mental models. So there are a lot of people in a lot of public service that aren't really aware of what Foresight is, and they sometimes confuse it with forecasting. So we emphasize that Foresight is a discipline that's been around for about 60 years. There's a number of graduate degrees awarded, and there's a large, robust global community of Foresight practitioners. We talk about systems, how it's a systematic process that seeks signs of change, and explore how those changes interact and lead to surprises, and that may disrupt the expected future. So it's along the lines of what Ulla had mentioned, not necessarily looking at the expected future, but looking at other plausible futures. And we emphasize that Foresight allows us to surface assumptions underlying current policy and question their validity, and maybe even replace some of them with more robust assumptions. We also emphasize that our objective is not to predict the future, but to come up with a range of plausible futures that should be taken into consideration in addition to the expected future. And the need to develop strategies that are robust across those ranges of futures. So these are the two complementary activities that we undertake at Horizons. We do a lot of scanning in order to identify changes in domestic and international environments. We focus on weak signals, particularly focus on the low probability, high impact events that people don't normally talk about or consider. There's signs of significant change that is starting to occur that could be underway in particular systems. Then we get into Foresight that explores how these changes interact in the system in order to create new public policy challenges and opportunities. So once again, not trying to predict the future, but to create a range of plausible futures. So needless to say, insightful scanning is the foundation for great foresight, so we spend a lot of time searching for those weak signals and low probability, high impact events. So this diagram is the code of plausibility and pretty much demonstrates the theory that underpins much of the work that we do in terms of conducting foresight and scanning at Horizons. Ulla had mentioned that there's no future we can find evidence about, and that's pretty much what this diagram represents. The left side of the diagram, right here. So basically, that's all about the past, and all data is in the past, and it's useful in terms of understanding and extrapolating in order to find out what the expected future is. And organizations do a pretty good job at doing that. However, we focus on the right side of this diagram. So demonstrates how we can prepare for plausible futures and account for low probability, high impact events. So we search for, instead of looking at the expected future, which a lot of people do, we focus on weak signals that are on both sides of this cone within the limits of plausibility. So this allows us this is what we consider the value added of the work that we do. Is a lot of people are working on an expected future, but we try to go away from that expected future. This is the particular process that we undertake in terms of how we produce our work. As was mentioned earlier, it's important to have a process in which we can sort of scaffolding which we can use in order to think about the future. So it's very collaborative, and this is the process that we undertake with departmental representatives when we do a Foresight project. So basically it involves identifying current commonly held assumptions about the system under study. So we collect these assumptions and then we put them aside. Then we undertake a comprehensive scanning process where we assess relevant trends, identify weak signals and insights that are pointing to change within a particular system. And then we get into a very visual-oriented exercise where we try to surface the mental models that people may have about a particular system. Try to identify the key elements in the system and the relationships that exist between them. And then we explore major change drivers throughout a range of futures through the use of various tools. We use cross-impact matrices, influence diagrams that explore the consequences of the particular change drivers. And then we identify potential discontinuities and uncertainties, and we don't necessarily do this in a particular order. It's like an iterative process, very fluid and dynamic. But when we've identified, when we've gone through a number of the scanning and change driver and system mapping, we use that to develop scenarios. We use what we call archetypal scenarios. So we develop 4 archetypal scenarios of a potential topic, and then we examine what are the policy challenges and opportunities for Canada within those archetypal scenarios. So as mentioned, this is a very fluid, dynamic, iterative process. Each step sort of builds on each other, but we can go back and forth as well. So some of the unique features of this method is, while deductive reasoning is important, it also values inductive reasoning. As was mentioned today, everybody in this room has a certain amount of knowledge about particular systems, and our job is to sort of surface that knowledge and use various tools in order to do that. System thinking is the foundation, so it's very core to our method. We engage knowledgeable people to share their mental models of the system and how it may evolve, to get a better understanding of the various perspectives. And this method uses our capacity to visualize the future through our mental models or movies. So we all carry that intuitive capacity to visualize the future in virtually everything that we do. So at Horizons, we rely on this basic skill to get a better understanding of the changes that are shaping particular systems. We use a number of techniques to do that. One of the techniques we use is guided imaging, which is a technique, a relaxation technique, and sort of playing out what potential changes in a particular system are to get people to get them in that space, in that future space. So as mentioned, these visual tools provide a scaffolding at every step of the process, which, because it's difficult to push out into the future without that type of scaffolding. And the process, what it does is it locks down issues in a manageable way so we can think about the future. This is the policy process as we, it's pretty standard. I'm sure you go through the same thing, but this is the policy process that we undertake in Canada. It ranges from problem identification through to implementation. And in the traditional policy development approach, most policies are often developed with the expected future in mind, and it's useful to prepare for those high probability, high impact events. But one of the main weaknesses of the traditional approach is that it assumes that the future is merely the extension of today, largely based on extrapolation, and does not take a systems approach, which systems really reflect the reality in which we live. It also seldom questions fundamental assumptions and has difficulty coping with surprises and discontinuities that may arise. So the potential contributions of foresight to the policy process, which we try to instill in with the people that we're working with, is that it can help in the agenda setting phase by identifying emerging issues and policy challenges. It can help shed light on the problem through the identification of weak signals of change, which show how a problem is evolving. It can help significantly in the analysis phase of policy development by questioning assumptions, exploring how change drivers are impacting the problem, and identifying how the problem could evolve through different scenarios. And it can help in the consideration of alternative solutions through testing strategies to ensure they're robust across a range of plausible futures. So this slide demonstrates some of the questions that we ask public servants in Canada to think about in terms of developing more forward-looking policies and to nurture more longer-term thinking capacities. So, in essence, we ask the policy makers to consider challenging their assumptions about the future, identifying weak signals, change drivers, and incorporating into their analysis. We encourage them to take a systems view and to consider plausible futures and resulting policy challenges. So it pretty much follows the process that I described earlier. So in Foresight, the main benefits that we communicate is it's the ability to better understand Canada's evolving interests in a complex changing world and develop an improved early warning system. It helps recognize opportunities and deal with surprises across a range of plausible futures, not just the expected future, and allows us to rehearse for change by testing approaches across a range of futures and focus current planning and research on strategic issues. So this is an example of how Foresight is connected to some of the core planning and policy processes of the public service in Canada. So most of the work in Canada in terms of work on the future occurs here in the short term, the 1 to 3 years. It concentrates on high probability, high impact events. So what departments do is they provide annual reports on plans and priorities every year. It lays out the priorities that each department has over the course of the year, and then there's departmental performance reports, which evaluate the department performance that was laid out in terms of the priorities at the beginning of the cycle. Most government departments also practice medium-term planning. So in some cases, that's not conducted on a regular basis, but is usually done when there's going to be some sort of transition. So probably about every 3 to 5 years. The focus is to generate new ideas for the incoming government and basically to stock the policy shelves on emerging policy issues. And so this is where we are in terms of Foresight. Horizons is the only horizontal organization that undertakes Foresight. There are a few departments that have Foresight units, but Horizons is the main one. And the main message here is that Foresight can provide a context to improve near and midterm thinking. And we believe it lays a foundation for us to develop robust strategies and cope in an increasingly complex world. But as you can see from this slide, and it's not even representative of the people up top here, but we're only 25 people here. And there are a few Foresight units within the different departments, but there's a lot of work happening here. So our main challenge is to promote Foresight in these 2 phases of work. In terms of Foresight capacity in the government of Canada, it's sort of waxed and waned over the past 30 years. The current capacity does exist in national defense, the National Research Council, and some of the security organizations. Departments also leverage some private sector Foresight organizations. In terms of scanning capacity, that's more developed than Foresight processes are. However, the focus on scanning is still in the near future or the expected future. There is an environmental scanning practice group that operates, in Canada that works across departments. It's been operating for about 15 years, but that also waxes and wanes. But there is a growing interest in developing foresight and scanning capacity, particularly among a number of departments such as Natural Resources Canada. And there's also growing interest in the use of scenarios and engaging in collaborative processes. In terms of the provinces, Canada, many of the Canadian provinces do a lot of scanning, and a few do some foresight work. The main ones are Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta. Ontario government, Horizons actually delivered some training to the Ontario government, where we trained 50 Ontario public servants on foresights, and subsequently to develop reports on a range of issues that took into account some foresight practices. What their Ontario government is doing is thinking of exploring options of institutionalizing foresight into government planning and decision-making processes. Quebec has a voluntary network of approximately 40 ministries that participating in scanning and foresight activities, and that's coordinated centrally. Alberta and some of the rest of the provinces focus some of their scenario work on energy and environmental issues, but it's not very well developed. In terms of non-governmental organizations, we have Foresight Synergy Network, and that meets every couple of months. There are some organizations like the International Institute for Sustainable Development, based in Winnipeg, and they're interested in using scenarios for some of the work they do in terms of land management and climate change and other environmental issues. And in terms of academic organizations, we have the Ontario College of Art and Design that has a course on strategic foresight, a master's course on strategic foresight, and has a strategic innovation lab. So in terms of our role in building foresight capacity, so the clerk of the Privy Council, who I mentioned is the most senior public servant in the government of Canada, has recognized the potency of foresight and the necessity to think longer term. So Horizons was tasked to help enhance foresight literacy and capacity of federal public servants so that they better incorporate longer term thinking into their policy work. So over the past 3 years, the clerk in all his reports to the Prime Minister has mentioned, in the past 3 reports to the Prime Minister has mentioned the importance of longer term thinking. So he really believes in this, but he doesn't necessarily think that we should be creating foresight units in every department. He basically thinks that what we should be doing is building the capacity of all analysts to use foresight tools as part of their regular policy toolkit. So Horizons is in the process of undertaking a project to enhance federal foresight capacity through a learning by doing approach. Our topic is the future of Asia, building on some of the work that we've done in the Canada-Australia Public Policy Initiative report that we produced, and given the increasing importance of Asia on the world stage. So in this process, we have engaged 15 departments, around 50 participants. The Horizons is responsible for the design and management of the overall process, team coordination, the meeting space and supplies. We engage them in our online collaborative platform. We do training, facilitation, feedback, support, and drafting of final reports. And the participants are responsible for the time commitment. So it's approximately 12 days of training. It occurs over an 8-month period from May to December of this year. And mostly they're half-day workshops and some full-day workshops. Other initiatives that Horizons has undertook in the past few years was in 2008-2009, we had a Canada at 150 project where we trained 150 public servants on foresight and scanning techniques, and the objective was to encourage young Canadians to think more long-term, to incorporate more long-term thinking and come up with emerging issues for Canada as it approached its 150th anniversary in 2017. We've also had a request from a number of organizations to help them with their medium-term planning exercises so that they can incorporate some scenario development processes in that. So we have been doing that over the past year or two. And these are some examples of products that we produce. So in the products that we do, we release released some of the information through videos, insight briefs, and Foresight reports, some of our findings from the different studies. But our main flagship publication is what we refer to as our Metascan, and here's a few of them. The last one we did was on emerging technologies, so it examines how 4 emerging technologies could drive disruptive social and economic change over the next 10 to 15 years. So we looked at biotechnology, nanotechnology, neuroscience technologies, and digital technologies. We talked about how AI, robotics, and data analytics could dramatically change the service sector and result in fewer workers, how 3D printing could change the economies and location of manufacturing by customizing parts and products, and synthetic biology could potentially change the economics and the flow of raw materials in agriculture, energy, and a number of other different sectors. So that was a Foresight study we did in 2013. Currently, we're doing we are in the process of doing a metascan on the future of Asia, which will be released in early next year. So all our reports are available on our website at www.horizon.gc.ca. So if you'd like to learn more about them, please feel free to take a look. Thank you very much.